Morning. It's Wednesday, July 2nd. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 635 days old. I'm your host, FDD Senior Research Analyst Natalie Ecanow, filling in for Jonathan Schanzer. It's his birthday today, so we're giving him a little break. Welcome back to the FDD Morning Brief. Those of you who've seen FDD Morning Brief episodes hosted by yours truly know that I watch Qatar like a hawk. So before I tell you who today's guest is, I can't help myself from taking a little detour. Guess who won an International Peace Award yesterday? Yup, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, the Prime Minister of Qatar, the same Qatar that sponsors Hamas. Can't make this stuff up. While you're chewing on that, let me introduce you to today's guest. Lisa Daftari is an award-winning investigative journalist and editor-in-chief of The Foreign Desk, a platform at the crossroads of foreign policy and quality journalism. Yesterday, John and Lisa caught up to unpack the aftermath of the 12-day war, focusing on its impact on Iranians both inside and outside the country. Will Iran's people finally rise against their oppressive rulers, or will the weakened but determined regime find a way to regroup? Stay tuned for that conversation coming your way shortly. The doors of diplomacy will never slam shut. That's what Iran's foreign minister told CBS News. He was commenting on the possibility of resuming nuclear talks with the United States, but slap that phrase on a t-shirt and sell it to Amir Al-Thani because boy, are those words that Qatar lives by. War in Gaza, Qatar is on the case. How about between Russia and Ukraine? Qatar is ready to assist. Heck, Qatar just mediated a peace agreement between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. But back to Iran. The spokesperson for Qatar's foreign ministry said that the Qataris are in daily contact with all parties involved in securing a broader, stronger nuclear deal. This round-the-clock effort comes on the heels of the ceasefire between Iran and Israel, which was reportedly made possible thanks to Qatar's assistance. Yes, diplomacy is preferable to war. What bothers me is that Iran attacked Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar and a ceasefire materialized within hours because the Qataris convinced Iran to get on board, which planted a haunting question in my brain. If the Qataris turned around an Iran ceasefire within a day or so, why the slog on the Gaza file? I don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but I can't help but think that if the Qataris really wanted a ceasefire in Gaza, they'd make it happen, or at least do more to make it happen. John said it, I've said it, and I'll say it again. Qatar needs to start feeling some pressure. Full stop. Now for your headlines. Headline 1. President Trump signed an executive order lifting sanctions on Syria. My golly, he did it. Back in May, President Trump said that he planned to lift the sanctions to, quote, give the Syrian people a chance at greatness. A promise made, a promise kept, as the White House announced yesterday. To be sure, sanctions on Bashar al-Assad and his cronies remain in place, so do sanctions on drug traffickers and human rights abusers, but otherwise consider the Syria sanctions program canceled. That means easing restrictions on foreign assistance and relaxing export controls on certain goods. Trump's executive order also directs the Secretary of State to review Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's designation as a foreign terrorist organization and interim Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara's designation as a specially designated global terrorist. This is when your regular host Jonathan Schanzer would remind you that al-Shara used to be a jihadi known as Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. Talk about a character arc. Headline 2. Iranian threats against Donald Trump and his administration keep on coming. Last week it was a fatwa, this week it's cyber war. Iranian hackers are threatening to release a trove of emails they stole from Trump's associates, including White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles and Trump lawyer Lindsey Halligan. The hackers identify themselves simply as Robert. In online chats with Reuters, Robert said they have about 100 gigabytes of emails that they're considering selling. The hackers didn't specify what exactly is in those emails or who they might sell them to. This is an example of what the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency described as a smear campaign designed to damage President Trump, discredit American officials, and divide the American people. It's propaganda for the digital age. And headline 3. While we're on the topic of suspicious Iranian activity, Danish authorities arrested a man suspected of collecting intel on Jewish targets in Germany. Authorities identified the suspect as Ali S. He was arrested last week and is awaiting extradition to Germany. Yesterday, German prosecutors said they believe Mr. S spied on specific sites and individuals in Berlin, including scoping out 3 properties last month. Yes, this was all likely in preparation for a terrorist attack, and yes, prosecutors believe that Ali S was working for Iranian intelligence services, perhaps even the IRGC Quds Force. It's no secret that the Islamic Republic is a threat, and that includes to the Iranian people. Since the war between Iran and Israel erupted, Iranian authorities have arrested hundreds of people and executed at least 6 accused of spying for Israel. The regime is setting up checkpoints, promoting harsher punishments, and planning to establish special courts to handle suspected traitors. This is a repressive regime doing its repressive thing, and that's why the FDD team has long said that maximum pressure must come with maximum support for the Iranian people. Okay, it's time to press play on that pre-recorded conversation between John and Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. So sit back, relax, and have a listen.
Welcome to the program, Lisa Daftari.
Thank you so much.
Great to have you here. I want to talk to you a little bit today about what's going on in Iran and maybe the Iranian diaspora. So first, so you're a Farsi speaker and you track what's going on in country. So maybe just tell us a little bit about what the media is saying first and foremost, the state-run media. Yeah. How are they casting what just happened? I mean, Donald Trump just dropped the midnight hammer on the Islamic Republic. The Israelis were flying with total impunity over the skies of Iran for 12 days, and yet they're spinning this as a win, are they?
Well, that is from the Islamic Republic handbook. This is what they have done for 46 years. Now, remember, this is the regime that came into power 46 years ago and automatically put the people of Iran into the Iran-Iraq war to have a win. So this is exactly what they have done time and time again. They spin the narrative, they flex their muscles, and they try to bring the people to rally around the flag over a military win, when in fact, the people now have obviously understood what is going on. They've looked under the hood. For 46 years, we've seen an evolution of the Iranian people that most people don't talk about. I won't even go back 46 years, but in 2005, I did a documentary on regime change, and I was invited to show that in Congress. I didn't have the full support of the Iranian people when I talked about sanctions, when I wrote about the JCPOA in 2015, the Iran nuclear deal, that being a bad idea. I mean, people called me Vatan Furush, which actually means you're a traitor. You're actually a sellout to your people. Why? Because the nuclear program would be a source of national pride. So we have seen this evolution. And I think that really started in 2009 with the Green Revolution, where they came out onto the streets. They're like, fraudulent election, fraudulent regime. Oh, that feels good. And then all of a sudden, we're seeing this coming of age. From 2009, you see this protests among people every time they rise up, whether it's over the price of eggs or over the price of bread, and then there's the bazaris and the truck drivers and the teachers. Every time they come out, this has gotten more and more expansive, and it's gotten deeper and deeper. So you're seeing protests in clerical cities. You're seeing disenchantment among all types of the ethnic groups inside Iran, all the religious groups inside Iran, all the different socioeconomic brackets inside Iran. So to bring us to this moment, the regime is saying one thing, and the people, obviously 92 million, it's very hard to generalize, but the majority of people inside Iran are freedom-seeking. That might mean different things to different people, but they're on the same page about wanting a better future for the people of Iran.
Okay, so we're seeing this disparity, and I think that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. Let the regime continue to put out messages that just don't resonate with the people. Right. And, you begin to see more of that friction emerge. We're only a couple weeks out from the Islamic Republic's defeat. What have you seen from the diaspora, of which you're a part? Mm-hmm. What is the diaspora doing right now to try to encourage change? I mean, we hear about, groups like Nufti, and we've had Nufti folks come on this program. Mm-hmm. We've had other leaders from the diaspora movement, different ways, writers, intellectuals, and, and the like. Is there a consistent message, or is it just down with the dictator?
Great question. There's also been a coming of age among the diaspora, right? So for 46 years, let's talk about the last 15. The question has always been, we talk about regime change, but who's going to take over? Who's going to be at the helm? Who's going to organize? Who's going to lead? And who's going to be the face or the new leader of Iran? And even that has been a lot of work among the diaspora to quiet the lobbies that are pro-regime, the ones who have access to the White House, the ones who have gone in and influenced Iran policy in Washington, D.C. It's crazy for people, the average person, to think that there are operatives of the Islamic Republic inside Washington, affecting how our government deals with Iran. And that has been the case in the Obama and Biden White Houses. And we're trying to silence those voices and actually let the people's voices be heard. So obviously, you talked about Mufti. Mufti was very well connected to Reza Pahlavi, the exiled prince of Iran. His voice has been heard the loudest. He's meeting with foreign leaders. He's getting his message out there. I actually had the honor of interviewing him here in LA at a global technology summit that talked about the future or the potential of a future democratic Iran and what kinds of economic opportunity that would unleash onto the region and the world. That's the message that they're trying to get out there. A democratic, free Iran will benefit everyone. And I think that's really the talking point that the diaspora, as well as the people inside Iran, have really tried to get out there. There's no reason for this regime to stay in place. It doesn't really benefit anyone. The other thing I want to talk about is this disparity that you talked about, that right now there's kind of I don't want to say a resentment. Let's just take that with a grain of salt because we're on media and we're limited for time. That where people outside Iran are like, regime change, come out onto the streets. And the people of Iran are like, wait, how, when, what? There's darkness. There's we don't have electricity. We don't have the internet. We can't organize. And at the same time, you're telling us to come out on the streets. We don't have weapons. And because of that, we're kind of at a place where the people of Iran want regime change. People outside Iran are telling them to make regime change, but they really don't have any way of doing that at this moment.
Okay, so that's a tough nut to crack. So, all right, you mentioned the pro-regime voices here in the United States. And by the way, it's not just in the U.S., right? I mean, we're
Correct.
aware of pro-regime voices across Europe. Networks that we just saw recently dismantled in places like Sweden.
Right.
But talk to us, and you don't need to name names if you don't want to, but if you do, we're very happy to have you drop some bombs. But I mean, what do you think their influence looks like right now? I mean, how much sway do they have after the regime just got shellacked by the Israelis and then by the United States? What kind of message can they possibly deliver right now? Right. That would buttress this regime in its time of near collapse?
Right. They're hanging on by a thread. And it's so obvious because they are resorting to these thug tactics, just like we saw inside Iran, right? The besiege. They have the equivalent on the streets of Europe, on the streets of Washington, D.C. We've seen so many of these pro-monarchists protesting in front of the consulate, and then you have them being beaten up by these pro-regime thugs. So they have their operatives everywhere, and this is part of their political warfare. And we've known that for years. And I think a lot of others, particularly in Washington, D.C. and other places, leadership is catching on to this influence campaign that is being launched by the Islamic Republic and others. I would say it exponentially diminished with the Women Life Freedom movement. That movement was very, very pivotal for the Iranian diaspora as well as the Iranians inside Iran, because it was a topic. It was about a woman, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman who gotten beaten to death for wearing her hijab too lax, showing some hair, that was able to bring people onto the same page, regardless of their political party or their religious affiliation, left, right, center. This is something that could get everybody on the same page. As of then, these lobbies, these voices got drowned out, because who can argue with such a small ask of freedom to show your hair, to wear what you want to wear, to kiss who you want to kiss on the streets of Tehran. So I think that became a very important blip in this, long timeline of the Iranian people really wanting to claim their freedom. And I think it's going to be very difficult to, while we're at an impasse, it's very difficult to move forward with regime change. It's very difficult to now go back and have any sort of credibility for this regime, especially here in the diaspora.
Okay. You've mentioned regime change a few times, and I got to say, it's a dirty term in Washington.
Oh, it is.
We don't talk about regime change, right? Because things went really sideways in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And we don't try to, engineer new regimes, because that just ends in disaster. We spend money, we lose, soldiers, blood and treasure, as they say.
Right.
So, we saw Donald Trump come out and say, MIGA, make Iran great again, which I love, and I need to get a hat, and no one is selling them yet, which is really driving me crazy.
Maybe we should do that.
I think there's some money in it. But so other than Trump and his "Make Iran Great Again" statement, and maybe a little bit from the Israelis, is there any Western country, is there any responsible actor out there calling for this? Because I do think that's important. The Iranian people still need to hear from world leaders.
Right.
And other than the crown prince, and we know he delivered that, I guess, sort of same famous statement now from Paris shortly after Midnight Hammer, I just haven't seen much. So what do you make of all that?
Yeah, I think, John, I'm sure you've read my op-ed. A few weeks before the war, I wrote an op-ed that said, not all regime changes are created equal. And that was exactly that. The opening paragraph was that we have this PTSD here in the West, particularly in the Republican Party, about regime change because they've always failed. Why would this one be any different? Why would we, especially when we would be creating some sort of vacuum, because we don't know who would take over. It's not like we really have, other than Reza Pahlavi, who lives in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., to import him as a leader. We don't really have a slam dunk kind of transition to a new government inside Iran. So why would this be any different? Look, Iran is completely different. You have a completely different unified freedom-seeking population. You have, an economy that can open up into the world. There's many, many talking points to be made. But to your point, it's not a popular topic, and it's not something that people think. We are trained now as foreign policy experts and analysts, whatever it is, to fix rather than to change. And I think that obviously the history speaks for itself there. With regards to Reza Pahlavi, he is doing he has an effort to do that, to tour and to speak to different leaders, for them to understand that the people inside Iran do not match up with its government, and how, like I said, all the different ways in which a free and secular democratic Iran would benefit the world. It would benefit Europeans are obviously benefiting from the Islamic Republic. That there's no, elephant in the room. Let's call it out. Why change a government when we're benefiting from it? Well, there would be more benefit, and that's what he's trying to get out there to Washington, to Europe, to whomever else will listen.
All right, last question for you before we let you go. Capitulation or surrender by the regime, we're not going to see it, right?
No.
I think it's highly unlikely. Having people come out into the streets without the weapons, without the communication, without all the tools that you mentioned earlier, also doesn't seem likely. What does seem possible to me, and I'm just curious to hear what you think about this scenario, is that you have internal tumult, that there are people within the regime that understand that this has been a disaster. This has been a 4 decades experiment that has failed. Do you think that it's possible right now that we see either, mid-level clerics or mid-level IRGC, somebody come out and just shiv the supreme leader, so to speak? Not necessarily literally, but figuratively, undermine the supreme leader and bring this thing down. Do you think that that's what we should be betting on right now? And do you think that's where the U.S. government should be putting its primary efforts?
So as difficult as it may seem, I think this has been the biggest chance the Iranian people have ever had for regime change, obviously for the many reasons that you just stated. But the challenging part about this regime is that it is laterally and horizontally fortified itself, right? So we're dealing with a regime that is sadistic, not suicidal. I don't know if many people in the West understand that. I think it's a very, very important point when you're dealing with this kind of enemy. But the number one, and I've said this many times, number one Achilles heel of this regime, that's why you see all the propaganda inside Iran, they're trying to get an ally among the Iranian people. Their biggest enemy is not the United States, it's not Israel, it's not the UN, obviously. It's inside Iran. The fact that the people could potentially rise up is what keeps the mullahs up at night. And I think for that reason, the crackdowns will be more brutal. It's going to be very, very difficult. But what we may see, and we've seen a bit of right now, and I know that the Pahlavi team is working on creating communications channels to actually really reinforce this more, is that you see defection among the military and police class. And once you start seeing that, that's where the real cracks begin. And let me tell you one thing that I think the Iranian people are incredibly brave, but they're not stupid. They're not going to rise up. They're not going to defect when they know that they can be hanged for it. They will if they see that there's potential, they have support from outside, from inside. What happens at the podium is extremely important too. That rhetoric, Donald Trump's rhetoric in supporting regime change, incredibly important to give them that hope, to give them that optimism, to say, if we do defect, if we do rise up, if we do come out onto the streets and risk our lives and send our children out there, that there's actually a chance to get our country back.
All right. We're going to leave it there. Really interesting stuff. Thank you, Lisa Daftari, for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me
on the FDD Morning Brief.
Okay, here's what FDD has on tap for you today. FDD Saeed Ghassaminejad, a former political prisoner of the regime in Iran, has a new piece in Visegrad 24. Despite setbacks from U.S. and Israeli strikes, Saeed warns that Khamenei's regime continues to wreak havoc by murdering dissidents and exporting terrorist ideology. The focus now must be on empowering Iranians to envision a future where their country is a force for good rather than a global threat. Meanwhile, my colleague Joe Truzman has a new piece in FDD's Long War Journal on the threats posed by Hamas to Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aid workers. Hamas reportedly placed bounties on these workers, Americans and Gazans alike, and deployed armed terrorists in humanitarian zones to sabotage aid efforts. This is yet another example of how the Iranian proxy endangers its own people to fuel chaos, a reality major media outlets continue to largely overlook. And finally, don't miss the latest episode of FDD's Foreign Policy. FDD founder and president Cliff May is joined by Rear Admiral retired Mark Montgomery and Bradley Bowman to analyze Trump's actions and rhetoric following the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, including his controversial remarks at the NATO summit. They also take a broader look at global alliances, adversaries, power projections, and more. It's a good one, so have a listen wherever you get your podcasts. And that'll just about do it for today. If you want more super smart things to read, check out our website and take a scroll through our social media. And please do consider making a tax-deductible donation to FDD. You can always do that at fdd.org/invest. The FDD Morning Brief team is off for Independence Day, so no July 4th episode. But don't fret, we'll be back on Monday the 7th. John will be joined by Colonel Richard Kemp, a retired British Army officer who's been up close and personal with the on-the-ground realities of the war in the Middle East. So make sure to tune in. Thanks for letting me host you today. I'm Natalie Ecanow, signing off for FDD.